To help me do that, I'm delighted to welcome Sir Michael Fabricant, a man that knows the workings of the House of Commons inside out, former Conservative MP, of course, who has sat on many a select committee. Hello, Sir Michael.
Good afternoon, Mark.
Sir Michael, what is your verdict on what you saw this morning and what you heard from the former head of the Foreign Office?
It's damning, isn't it? The incurious nature as well of Starmer comes out. This is a man who headed up the Department of Public Prosecutions, though of course completely ignored all the wrongdoing of Jimmy Savile. He says that he didn't know until last Tuesday what was going on. And yet on the 12th of September, The Independent had already said that what's his name? Peter Mandelson. There we go. Peter Mandelson had actually...
why don't you just save time, call him the Prince of Darkness, Sir Michael?
Yes, I think that's much more memorable. You know, it's a cycle.
You couldn't remember his name because he's got so many nicknames.
And you know what? You don't want to remember the bad things in life. And Peter Mandelson is one of the very bad things in life. But, you know, way back on the 12th of September, The Independent said he'd failed his vetting. A journalist even published a few days ago a WhatsApp conversation he had with Number 10 about that back in September. And then I found out that on the 16th of September, a member of Parliament, Rachel Gilmore, actually raised the fact in the House of Commons that Mandelson had failed his vetting. And yet Starmer still claims he didn't know till last Tuesday. And I truly don't know whether the guy is a barefaced liar. And I think the vast numbers of population would say that he probably is, or whether he just is a stranger to reality.
Well, I think that's the key issue, and that's what we have to get to the bottom of. What were the headlines for you, Sir Michael?
I think the headlines basically are what you said in your monologue just now, and in particular, the fact that it was Number 10 who were determined that Mandelson should get through come hell or high water, and as you quite rightly said, knowing full well that the man is a wrong-un. Twice he was sacked from his job. They knew his involvement. Of course they did. We all knew his involvement with Epstein. The guy was obviously going to fail his vetting because of his connections through various different methods with China and Russia. He's a real security risk. And then we found out, by the way, that he had strap 3 status. That means he had access while ambassador to the most sensitive intelligence. Now, we already know that he shared with Epstein, when he was Secretary of State, information that was going to be of financial benefit for investments by Epstein. Did he share any of this strap 3 intelligence with Russia or with China? You know, we don't know. But I think the other thing that comes out from it all is now the complete breakdown of trust between this government and the civil service. And believe me, it'll get worse. And the question is, that you so ably put, is how long can Starmer survive?
Well, that's the issue. What did you make of Sir Ollie Robbins' performance, his demeanour, his mood, his tone?
I think he was brave. I think he was balanced. I think he showed such sadness, though, and regret that what he had been aiming for, a top career in the civil service, had been dashed through bitter, immature, not particularly clever people who didn't like the fact that Ollie Robbins was doing one thing wrong. And you know what that was? He was doing his job properly instead of getting the F on with it, breaking all the protocols that exist, and instead giving Mandelson access to high intelligence sources, even though he had failed. And, you know, I watched Starmer's performance yesterday. This was a man who is so obsessed with process, so obsessed with the love of his pens and papers and arranging his desk.
Procedure, the rules.
He can't see the wood from the trees. He can't govern. And what he's doing, he's slowly rotting himself down But far sadder, he's bringing this whole nation down with him.
Well, it's extraordinary. And I want to ask all of you a very tough question today, because it's quite clear that Sir Keir Starmer wanted Peter Mandelson, a disgraced figure, long before vetting was even considered. He wanted him to be UK ambassador to the United States, irrespective of rules and procedure, irrespective of probity and protocol, irrespective of national security. So I've got a serious question to ask you this afternoon. Is Sir Keir Starmer a dangerous Prime Minister? This is Talk. You are listening to Talk, and Sir Ollie Robbins, the most senior member of the Foreign Office, the most senior civil servant in the Foreign Office, has of course been sacked by Sir Keir Starmer. He had his right of reply this morning at a House of Commons Select Committee. For reaction, I'm delighted to welcome Sir Michael Fabricant, former Conservative MP, someone that knows the workings of Parliament very well indeed. Sir Michael, what did you make of Emily Thornberry's chairmanship of this session?
I think Emily Thornberry was trying to be desperately fair to the Labour Party and to Starmer. I suspect the whips had a word with her and probably said, look, don't give Starmer too hard a time, for heaven's sake. You know, you may want to end up in the House of Lords sometime, and so on and so forth. I think the point was that she did allow her committee members to ask very probing questions, and it was really those questions which actually revealed the sorry truth about the whole affair. I would add, you know, there is a whole question now about what happens to Starmer. I was struck when I watched the presentation that Starmer made yesterday in the House of Commons, how silent, how grim-faced the backbenchers were. And I'm talking about his Labour backbenchers. There's no love, clearly, for their leader. I think many of them will have spoken to their own whips and saying it can't go on like this. I also suspect that what has happened is that the whips would have been going round and saying two things. One, if you do anything that damages the Prime Minister between now and the May elections will end up even worse than they probably already are, and you'll be responsible. So for that reason, I think that Starmer will remain in place for another 2 or 3 weeks. The question then is what happens after the May elections, which I think will be a complete disaster for Labour. And I suspect what will happen, because, you know, it's a lot harder to get rid of a Labour Prime Minister and a Labour leader than it is to get rid of a Conservative Prime Minister or a Conservative leader, because the rules are very, very different in the Labour Party. But I think what will happen is I feel that backbenchers will go to their whips and say it just can't go on like this. They'll be speaking with other cabinet members and saying it can't go on like this. And then I think finally members of the cabinet will traipse in to Starmer's office, as they did all those years ago with Margaret Thatcher, and say, I'm sorry, but we can't support you anymore.
Starmer has tried to hide behind legal ease, but the damage is done, isn't it, Sir Michael? He's over.
The damage is done. I think it is over. Or to put it more bluntly, I think he's toast. And he deserves to be toast, because as Kemi Badenoch, who, when she first, by the way, became leader, I didn't think she'd be very good at it. But I have to say that for the last 6 months, she's improved immensely. And her speech yesterday really was very clear in precisely the nature of Starmer. And it's not just his incuriosity, the fact that he seems to show no interest in real detail in the job that he's doing. And as I said earlier, he didn't seem to have that much interest in what he was doing as Director of Public Prosecutions, ignoring people like Jimmy Savile and others. But the point of the story is that I think that you know, he will continue until there comes a time when, as Kemi Badenoch says, he will have to go, because it's just unsustainable. The government will just limp from one disaster to another. And certainly, you know, the man in the street, I was having a coffee the other day in Lichfield, and people I was just sitting in the street and people were just coming up to me and saying they have never seen any government like it or any prime minister like it. A man who not only hides behind process, is prepared to throw so many people under a bus, as Kemi Badenoch said yesterday, throw anybody who gets in his way, or even people who haven't got in his way, but are just the convenient to be thrown under a bus in order to protect his own skin. Is that the sort of person we want leading our nation?
Well, that's a great question. Now, no evidence exists to show that Sir Keir Starmer was directly involved in the decision not to prosecute Jimmy Savile while serving as Director of Public Prosecutions. But you're right to wonder why the guy at the top, when that case was overlooked, did not face the consequences. And here we go again. This is something that's happened on Starmer's watch. He remains in post while blaming everyone else, including Ollie Robbins, whose great crime appears to have been to have followed the rules, Sir Michael, and also to have executed the will of number 10 in getting this appointment across the line.
Yeah, they wanted to get it across the line because they wanted him in place before the inauguration of the president so that he could be one of the first ambassadors. And I think in the end he was the first ambassador. I can see the urgency. But why choose somebody like Mandelson, whom you know, if you've got any common sense, is bound to fail the vetting because of his connections with China and Russia, and the fact, it would seem, is an habitual liar? The fact that twice he was brought back into government and twice he was thrown out of government because of his lying and because of his lust for money. This is where it all comes down to. It's lust for money, plus the rather unsavoury friends he keeps.
Most definitely. A little bit of breaking news for you. A further 7 arrests have been made in the past 48 hours by counter-terrorism policing officers investigating several arson attacks at Jewish sites in London. This according to the Met Police. We also have the quite outrageous news, Sir Michael, that Labour stand to lose 1,600 seats at the local elections in a best-case scenario, as 3 in 4 Brits say that things are getting worse. It was priced in that Labour would do badly in May. Do you think the events of this week will make things worse for them?
They'll make it incalculably worse. I mean, at the moment, I'm speaking to you from Snowdonia, the Snowdonia National Park in Wales. And Wales...
Are you hiking?
I've just been on a hike this morning.
Have you been up a peak?
I rapidly put on a tie. I was wearing my sweater and I walked a good 5 miles this morning.
Can I do say you looked flushed and I wondered what it was you'd been doing to yourself?
Well, we won't go into that, but... One of the things
Please don't make a habit of coming on air out of breath and sweating. It's really inappropriate.
Yes,
on
well, one of the
family
things
show,
I love coming on the radio and television with you, Mark, is our frank conversation at times. But I think, you know what? I better not go into too much detail why I'm so flushed and why I'm so sweaty.
Well, listen, you've been on Snowdonia, but is Starmer on a slippery slope?
He is on a slippery slope, and as I'm saying...
Has he peaked?
He's not only peaked. I'm in the national park, not necessarily Mount Snowdon.
No.
But the point is that Wales has been the heartland of the Labour Party, and I think they're going to lose badly. It's 3rd or 4th place.
It's quite astonishing. Could reform come number 1 in Wales? Is it conceivable?
It's conceivable. At the moment, it looks as if Plaid might just scrape through, but they might not actually have enough members to be in full overall control. So the question will be, who will Plaid go in with? They couldn't go in with the Conservatives, I wouldn't have thought. They certainly won't go in with Reform. There are not that many Green candidates expected to win in Wales, it seems. So it's really between, well, they'll have to go in with Labour, I guess, in which case it'll be all the same all over again, including a lousy health service in Wales. You know, when I look at the health service in Gwynedd, where I am at the moment, with that in Lichfield, where I normally live, you know, the two are incomparable. And
well, I mean,
got my
that's
COVID jab on Saturday, and it all went very smoothly.
You're a brave man, Sir Michael.
That's another reason why I'm fussed.
Can I also bring you more breaking news, courtesy of my executive producer, Finlay? Sir Keir Starmer has told his cabinet that Sir Ollie Robbins made an error of judgment, but is a man of integrity and professionalism, adding it is wrong for current cabinet office officials to be attacked after sharing information about Lord Maldon's security clearance with the Prime Minister. I've got a simple question for you, Sir Michael. Who's won this PR battle, Robbins or Starmer?
Well, it certainly ain't Starmer. And you know what? I don't think Robbins is the sort of man who's been fighting a PR battle. I think he just wanted to get the truth out there. And isn't it remarkable, that statement you read out just now, absolving, really, Robbins of any crime whatsoever, and yet he was sacked. He was thrown under a bus. He was decided to be expendable because, something had to be got in the way of Starmer getting pushed out, which is an inevitability.
Well, let's have a listen to the Prime Minister, if we can, Finlay, speaking yesterday.
So let me be very clear. The recommendation in the Peter Mandelson case could and should have been shared with me before he took up his post. Mr. Speaker, let me make a second point. If I had known before he took up his post that UKSV recommendation was that developed vetting clearance should be denied, I would not have gone ahead with the appointment.
Well, there you go. So do you want to just briefly, Sir Michael, take me through the timeline of Starmer's premiership now going forward? He'll stay for the May elections because it's not practical to find another leader at that point. No one wants to be front and centre of what will be a disastrous day. So what do you anticipate will happen in the weeks ahead?
Well, I think what will happen is that, as I said earlier on, the backbenchers will say we don't want him to continue. I think it's quite possible that members of the cabinet will say the same. But if he's obstinate and decides to stay, there are mechanisms. It would need 84 members of the Labour Party to come up with an alternative candidate for Prime Minister. That's the big difference with the Conservatives. You just have a vote of no confidence. In the Labour Party, you actually have to come up with an alternative. And I think they will come up with an alternative. It may be a stalking horse, but it'll open the floodgates. I think he's toast. But can I just say, I just watched that little extract just now, and you can always guarantee that when he says, let me be clear, it's not clear at all, and he's going to tell a lie. And he said, let me be clear, if I had known. Had he known? On the 12th of September, he knew, and yet he lied, saying, this is Starmer, that he only knew last Tuesday. I read on the 12th of September in The Independent that Mandelson had failed the vetting. It was known. And it was extraordinary.
So you're going on the record, Sir Michael, to say that you do believe the Prime Minister was lying, that the first he heard of this was Tuesday?
Yes, I just find it...
And you don't use that word lightly, do you? Because it's a word that's banned in the House of Commons.
Absolutely, and some people use it in order to be thrown out, as Lee Anderson did. And I did like his little line, he can't even lie straight in bed. But, it is remarkable. I think the argument goes in Starmer's head that if you lie and assert things very clearly, and you say, let me be clear, he thinks you can get away with it. What was it that... not Goering, Goebbels, the propaganda minister, said, if you tell a lie often enough, people will begin to believe it. I find it extraordinary. When he was in opposition, I thought, well, at least he's an honourable man. I don't think he's an honourable man at all. I think he's a rather desperate person, clinging on to his job at the expense not only of the civil service, but as Britain as a whole.
Sir Michael, a delight to have you on the programme. Thank you for your valuable time and your instant response to what we've seen at a House of Commons Select Committee this morning. Sir Michael Fabricant, former Conservative MP and mountaineer, no less, who I understand has designs at some point on going up Ben Nevis. And good luck with that. Folks, I've got a simple question for you today.